o'clock.
Good to go.
You got 7? All right. Let 'em go.
45th coming up.
Ready, guys?
Yep.
I now call to order the July 13th, 2017 meeting of the City Council Planning Board. Mr. Secretary, can we have the roll call, please?
Yes. Mayor Donches,
Present.
Mike Peterson,
Present for Mayor Donches.
Adam Varley,
Here?
Scott Leclaire,
Here.
Ed Weber, here. Sean McGinnis, Thomas Lopez, Steve DeCrane,
Present.
Dan Kelly,
Here.
David Robbins, Jerry Rapucci,
Here.
Chanel Mystery, Megan Gankus.
And we have no alternate members, so everyone is participating and voting this evening. Next on the agenda, we have for consideration the minutes of the June 15th, 2017 meeting. Were there any questions or comments on the minutes? If not, I'll take a motion.
I make a motion that we accept the minutes as presented.
Motion by Mr. Rapucci to accept the minutes. Is there a second?
A second.
Seconded by Mr. Peterson. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Scott, Dan?
Yep.
Okay, motion passes. Communications, good evening, Roger.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of Planning Board. If you turn to your packet, I'll quickly go through the items. The first item, the board received a communication concerning the case old business item number 122 Manchester Street, from a John Arnold with Inkling and Allen, an attorney's firm representing the applicant, requesting that it be continued further. You have a technical review meeting sheet to assist the board in determining regional impact under other business number 1. And other communications are concerning other business item number 2. We received the updated version of the revised accessory dwelling unit ordinance today at noon, and so I made you a copy of that. The Planning Committee, the Aldermanic Planning and Economic Development Committee, is requesting comments from the board, and I also included the original version so you can see what changes have been made and which haven't. We can go over that later. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. Report of committee and liaison. Mr. Kelly, Mr. Weber, anything to report?
In RPC, I don't know if I reported this before or not, but the chairman has resigned and moved on to Rockland, and they still haven't found a new replacement for him yet.
Nothing. HDC had a meeting. I wasn't able to be there. I was on vacation, so when I go back, I'll get the pertinent information and report back next month.
Thank you. I will now read the procedure for this evening's meeting. After the legal notice of each conditional special use permit, site plan, or subdivision plan is read by the chair, the board will determine if the application is complete and ready for the board to take jurisdiction. The public hearing will begin, at which time the applicant or representative will be given time to present an overview and description of their project. They shall speak to whether or not they agree with the recommended staff stipulations. The board will then have an opportunity to ask relevant follow-up questions of the applicant or staff. The chair will then ask for testimony from the audience. First, anyone wishing to speak in opposition or concern to the plan may speak. Please come forward to the microphone and state your name and address for the record. This will be the time to express your concerns or ask questions you may have regarding the plan. Next, testimony will come from anyone wishing to speak in favor of the plan. The applicant will then be given a rebuttal period, at which time they shall respond to any concerns raised by prior public testimony. One public member will then be allowed to respond to only those items brought forth during the applicant's rebuttal period. After this has been completed, the public hearing will end, and the board will resume the public meeting, at which time the board will deliberate and vote on the application before us. We ask that both sides keep their remarks to the subject at hand and not repeat what has already been said. We want to be fair to everyone and make the best possible decision based on the testimony presented, and considering all applicable approval criteria established in the National Revised Ordinances. Thank you for your interest and courteous attention. I ask you please turn off your cell phones at this time. Old business conditional special use permits, none. Old business subdivision plans, none. Old business site plans, case number 1, Diane E. Gimber and Bishop Real Estate Management, Inc. owners, Granite Green Investment Partners applicant, proposed 18-unit age-restricted housing condominium site plan development. The property is located at 122 Manchester Street, sheet 59, lot 135. Urban residence located in Ward 2. This case was tabled from our June 15th, 2017 meeting. And with respect to this case, we are not in the public hearing. We had closed the public hearing the evening that it was held some months ago. Just to expand on what Roger said for the benefit of those members of the public who might be here who are interested in this case, we did receive a letter from the applicant requesting that we grant a further continuance. The applicant received an unfavorable decision from the zoning board and has now appealed that decision to the Superior Court and has asked that we continue this case until the zoning matter has been finally resolved. So again, just for the benefit of those in the public, I wanted to give you a sense of what we're considering this evening with respect to this case. So with that in mind, as the board members are all aware, we do have that request from the applicant. There is a requirement under the ordinance that the planning board, or actually under state statute, that the planning board issue a decision within 65 days. However, that 65-day requirement may be waived by the applicant and has in fact been waived by the applicant several times already. And the applicant is indicating their agreement to waive that 65-day requirement again, and is requesting that we therefore then continue this case, as I mentioned, until the zoning appeal has been finally resolved with a decision on the zoning matter. So that is the issue before the board this evening. So, thoughts? Mr. Leclerc?
Well, we're in the meeting, right? So at this point, we're in the public.
The public meeting,
We're still in
correct.
the public meeting, yeah, okay. So I guess, yeah, it seems clear to me that we need to get some information from the results of the review and also from zoning, which would be before we can do anything on the planning side that's productive, so that's my opinion.
Does anyone disagree with that view?
I agree. I think you're hearing you right, that we should just grant this continuance until we get an outcome from the court on the circumstances with zoning.
Mhm.
I agree with you.
Anybody else? No?
Okay.
I'll make a motion.
Mr. Leclerc?
Not really.
I mean, we're not in the public hearing. If it's solely to if we've misstated your request in any way.
Just to clarify the letter. For the record, my name is John Arnold from Hinkley Island. I submitted the letter, and I just wanted to clarify, in the letter, we requested to continue until 30 days after the zoning appeal is finally resolved. For the ease of reference, I think it might make sense to pick a date certain, say 6 months out, so that the city doesn't have to go through a renoticing process, but we're not here on a month-to-month basis, giving updates on the zoning. And if we come back 6 months from now and the case hasn't been resolved, we can let you know and ask for a further continuance at that point. But I think it makes sense to have a date certain on the record again for all the abutters and everybody who's participating know when to come back, and so the board doesn't have to renotice it.
Well, we'll consider that, but I think we may be inclined not to use a date certain in this instance, but thank you for that clarification. Sure. So my suggestion would be, in this instance, normally we would continue to a date certain, but given the circumstances here and the fact that we have continued this to a date certain several times already, with no change in circumstances, I think continuing it until, some date of finality, even if it's not a date certain, may be preferable, and then maybe just get the input from staff here in terms of, if that were the case, would the continued date, assuming, again, that it's not a date certain, that it is after the appeal is finally resolved, would there then be a process available for renoticing?
Yes, once we know when it'll be heard again, then we could send out butter notifications, because this might not be resolved for quite some time, and some of the abutters might have moved, or I think it would probably be best to re-notify the abutters.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm still comfortable with the, with sort of 30 days after the appeal's resolved or our next meeting following that. So, understanding that staff's you're gonna notify the abutters anyway at that point, so. So, I'd like to still make a motion.
Mr. Leclerc?
I'd like to make a motion that we, continue, this matter, until 30 days after the zoning appeal is resolved, or our next regularly scheduled planning board meeting following that. So, I don't wanna have a special meeting, put it that way. It'll be the next planning board meeting after that.
So the motion by Mr. Leclerc is to continue this application until a date after the zoning appeal is finally resolved, either 30 days thereafter or the next regularly scheduled planning board meeting. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Mr. Kelly. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. New business conditional special use permits, none. New business subdivision plans. Case number 2, Andrea James Realty LLC and VDAC Realty LLC owners. Application and acceptance of proposed one-year extension of a subdivision and lot line relocation plan. Properties located at 93 and 97 Daniel Webster Highway and L West Hobart Street, sheet 128, lots 23, 33, and 81, zoned highway business and urban residence, and this is located in Ward 7. As to case number 2, can I have a motion that this application is complete and ready for the board to accept jurisdiction?
All right, so move.
Motion by Mr. Rapucci, is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Kelly, is there any further discussion?
No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
I guess I'll just speak up a little bit. I'm Alan Mello. I'm managing member of VDAC Realty LLC, which is the owner of 97 Daniel Webster Highway, and also Andrea James Realty LLC, which is the owner of 93 Daniel Webster Highway. These two properties above one another. About a year ago, we were before the board asking for a subdivision plan, which was granted, and with that, there were a few stipulations that came along with that. And I was under the impression that those were being addressed in a timely fashion. Unfortunately, several months ago, when I readdressed these with the engineering firm, they had not progressed along in a timely fashion as I had anticipated. So I'm here tonight to ask for more time, a one-year extension to keep this subdivision in place. I'm not proposing any changes from what was previously approved. Subsequent to this approval, unfortunately, I've also changed engineering firms, and that happened about a month and a half ago. So that is the main determination for why I'm looking for a little bit more time to keep that active. We do want to address, there was stipulation number 2 from Ms. Walker and number 3 from the fire department. And then also, we need to update the site plans for 97 and 93 respectively. And once again, my apologies, I was under the impression that this was a lot further along in the process, and time got away from us. So, that's in a nutshell. I'd be happy to answer any other questions
Any questions from the board?
No, I just have a question for staff. Just this plan that's submitted, it's a different engineer, different stamp. Is that administratively, is that an administrative change on the plan?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure exactly, working out all the details if the old engineer is gonna be the one stamping the plan, or how they're gonna proceed with it.
We're kind of,
This is still the old plan, right here?
Correct.
Okay. So this is,
That's the old
so you
plan.
just wanna get a continuance
I want to get a continuance on this old plan right now.
on the old plan? I'm just wondering if it's like, does that work? You know, when the firm changes.
Well, we have
Yeah.
had some cases too where, for instance, Kukul and Cormier is
Right.
no longer in business.
Right.
And then, I think Painter Swanson had bought the rights to the plans.
Yep.
So, I mean, as far as I know, it shouldn't be an issue as long as we have stamp plans by your engineer.
That's correct. I mean, there'll have to be something worked out between your new engineer, HSI, and Maynard relative to this plan, I presume.
Right.
Because Maynard's no longer gonna be representing you on this plan, so someone will have to do all of the construction, presume the construction drawings, the bonding sheets, everything else, and have to sign the plans. So, that's a procedural thing that needs to be worked out, but whoever ultimately stamps it is responsible for their work.
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to make sure for his own clarification, that wasn't an actually a different plan once you changed that, so regardless of whether the lines in the middle are all kind of in
Well,
the same
I
place.
presume all the lines are correct from the previous surveyor, so,
Yeah,
you know, it's a surveyor's stamp on there.
yeah, okay,
Usually those don't change.
right, okay. That's all I needed to know.
Any other questions? Looks like we're all set. Thank you. Is there anyone in the audience wishing to speak in opposition or concern to this plan?
Good evening, Kerry Sinkowitz, representing the estate of Marilyn Sinkowitz. We're the abutter. I'm just concerned that there's any changes, that I be notified of any changes.
So certainly at a certain level, if there were material changes made to the plan, then the applicant would have to come back to the planning board for a new approval. As to sort of what constitutes material, I mean, I would imagine there are certain, you know, like minor drafting corrections and such that would not come back before the planning board, right?
But as part of this process too, the applicant is required to update, there was 2 other site plans, so it will be coming back to planning board again, and you will be notified for that as well. But say they were to change the lot sizes or anything like that, or maybe make it more lots, it would have to come back to planning board, and you would be notified.
Question for him, did the applicant come and speak with you before, a year ago? Did he come and talk with you about the plans at that time?
The applicant did not talk to me about the plan. He talked to Mr. Hollis. I was represented by Mr. Hollis.
Okay, okay, so the applicant did speak with someone for you?
Mr. Hollis made an arrangement that Stetson Street was gonna be put in if the site was gonna be developed. It would allow access to the property.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. I'm assuming no, but I'll ask, is there anyone in the audience wish to speak in favor of the plan? Did the applicant want to add anything?
No, as I say, I'm not proposing any changes at the plan right now, and if there's anything major, of course, we're gonna be back in front here, and, there's no changes. We did correspond with Morgan Hollis, about easements through Stetson Street and also through the, street that goes between the 2 properties. I say street, it's kind of a paper but we worked out agreements for access at a later date. So there was correspondence on that, but there are no changes. It's just an extension of time so that we can address some of the other issues that are outstanding.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you for confirming that. Staff, have anything to add?
Staff has nothing to add.
Okay, closing the public hearing?
Yes.
This concludes the public hearing on this application. We will now take our deliberations into the public meeting. The board does reserve the right to recall any party for further clarification. Seems fairly straightforward, no changes. I think we got, yeah, Scott, we got your engineering question resolved.
Yep.
I certainly think this is amenable to a motion. Someone would like to make one?
I'll make a motion that we grant the applicant's request for a one-year extension as requested.
Motion by Mr. Pucci to, finding that the requirements outlined in subdivision or section 190-138G have been satisfied, and granting the request for the extension. Is there a second to that motion?
No, second it.
Second by Mr. Kelly. Is there any further discussion?
I would just say, make sure that the prior conditions of approval are included in the motion, yeah. There's stipulations on the
Subject to,
old
yeah,
one.
subject to the stipulation of the
Yeah.
staff report.
So
Sorry.
So many.
So, sorry, amended
Yep.
motion by Mr. Rapucci, motion to approve, finding that the plan does meet the requirements outlined in subdivision NRO section 190-138G with the stipulation, the one stipulation as written in the staff report. With that amended motion, is there a second?
I'll still second it.
Second by Mr. Kelly. Is there any further discussion?
Nope.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Good night.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Night.
New business site plans, case number 3. This case has been postponed until the September 14th, 2017 meeting. Other business, case number 1, review tentative agenda to determine proposals of regional impact. We do have a technical review meeting agenda. If anyone's had the opportunity to take a look at that, make a motion. Mr.
I'd
Claire?
Just make a motion, having reviewed the technical review meeting agenda, that there are no items of regional impact.
Motion by Mr. Leclerc is that having reviewed the technical review meeting agenda, that there are no proposals of regional impact. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Second by Mr. Rapucci. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Other business, case number 2, referral from the Aldermanic Planning and Economic Development Committee seeking a recommendation on an amendment by the committee to O-17-036, amending the accessory dwelling ordinance. And this had been tabled from the June 15th, 2017 meeting because we were awaiting some further changes from the committee. And so I understand, Roger, that that's what we have before us at this point, is this is the most up-to-date.
That is, there's 2 ordinances in front of you. One is just, says ordinances in front, but if you read the 4th line down, it says, Planning and Economic Development Committee meeting 6/20/2017. That is the latest version that came out of a planning committee that's going to the Board of Aldermen. They requested the board to relook at it and make sure that you reaffirm your favorable recommendation of last April 13th. Now, I included the version of an ordinance that you recommended favorably on April 13th, and that is, it's on a format with the ordinance in front, and it says Planning Board meeting April 13th.
Right.
So if you want to go line by line, I've given you a copy of a state law on ADUs, that's accessory dwelling units. And I also gave you a copy of your favorable recommendation with a suggested change. That change was made to the ordinance by the planning committee, and there are very few changes. There was a change that was made the last time, but that was removed by the committee at their meeting on the 20th. But if you like, I can go through on the version, your original, the 13th, I went through and highlighted. It's a gray tone on the paper of what changes were made between that version and what the present version is. So if you want to put them side by side, I can run through those if you like. If not, if you feel comfortable making a recommendation, we can do that, so.
I think it'd probably be worth just
Okay.
running through them quickly.
Okay. On the first page, under, in 19032B standards, the first paragraph, it says, it's highlighted a maximum of, that a maximum of was taken out, and it was just put in at 750 in the new ordinance. In other words, the accessory dwelling unit cannot exceed 750 square feet. So if it was 751 square feet, it would not be permitted under the ordinance.
Right. It seems like the, a maximum of was just sort of,
Yeah, it's just
Look at
cleaning
it.
up the language.
yeah.
And if you want to turn the page, the next change was on paragraph number 5. The new paragraph number 5 inserted, as you can see at the place of residence, a new sentence that says, for a period of at least 5 years following the granting of a certificate of occupancy for the accessory dwelling unit. So that is what's new in the new ordinance.
That, number 5 wasn't in the other one at all.
No, it was not. The one you reviewed.
How is that either that doesn't seem, how would you enforce that?
That's up for your discussion, I guess. If you would like to see that change, you could make a recommendation to the full board, the planning committee.
I feel like that's like, so you move in and you wanna make a in-law or something apartment, you gotta wait 5 years.
You gotta wait 5 years, yeah.
Well,
You have to wait 5 years before you can leave. That's what it's saying. You have, if I'm reading this right, the owner of the property must occupy either the primary or accessory dwelling unit as the owner's principal place of residence for a period of at least 5 years following the granting.
Yeah, but, yeah, so I
Oh,
think it's,
but-
in order to have an this accessory dwelling, you have to, right, you have to have been residing there as your principal residence for at least 5 years.
So
That
it's
doesn't
after.
sean,
It's
it's
after,
it's
not
after.
before.
How is that,
after 5 years, I presume it could, both units would not need the owner occupant to be in the premises.
Well, hold on, let's see. See, I think there's two different ways you can read it.
Yeah.
One is,
I'm reading it wrong.
one is, you have to be living there for 5 years, and after 5 years, you can move away, and it can still be an accessory unit, accessory dwelling unit. The other way to read it is, you move in, and you wanna create the accessory dwelling, but you can't until you've lived there for at least 5 years.
it's definitely
But
not
it's
saying
continuous.
that. That would be contrary to the state statute.
Right, so it's not saying that.
I'm saying, the city couldn't make a rule that said you can't have an accessory dwelling unit
5 years,
for 5
5
years after you buy a property. That,
at least 5 years.
I don't see how that's conceivable. And I don't see how we can
No,
tell people,
We're not doing that, it's not doing that.
if you do that, let's say you make this rule, isn't that doing the actual opposite of what you're trying to control? Because you need to have the owner of the property living there for it to be an accessory dwelling unit.
They're
right?
saying, they're saying
Well,
that.
but I
They're
guess
saying,
not if you
they're,
change
they're kind of like, they're actually making that more lenient with this. They're saying you only have to be, the property owner that only has to live there for 5 years, and then, what is it, 2 apartments?
Yeah, I mean, that's,
You could, a good lawyer could do it. What I see that they're trying to do is state that you're not allowed to make an auxiliary unit until you've lived there for 5 years, restricting the homeowner for 5
I was gonna say,
years.
that's the other way you could read it.
Yeah, but I don't see that it's in the state law that you, a person that wants to do it, no matter what time frame, the state law states you have to be primary owner to even have, to put one in your house. That's what the law states, you
The
have to be.
paragraph in the state law is paragraph number 6, under 674:2, and it's a permissive, it says a municipality may require owner occupancy of one of the dwelling units, but it shall not specify which unit the owner must occupy. So it's a may.
Yeah, and it says a
So-
municipality may require the owner demonstrate that one of the units is his or her principal place of residence. The municipality may establish reasonable regulations to enforce such a requirement. So I think you could, I don't think the state law would prohibit necessarily a 5-year waiting period. I mean,
Yeah,
somebody could argue
see-
that it's unreasonable, but.
It is unreasonable.
So you're still a 5-year wait, you're looking at this like you can't have an accessory unit for 5 years?
I don't know what the intent
I don't-
is, but I
don't
guess
think
it's.
that's, I think it's the other way around.
If
I
there's
think it's once you
confusion,
make one, you have to
among-
live there for 5 years.
if there's confusion
Yeah.
amongst us,
Yeah, it is, it's definitely after.
it needs to be cleaned up.
Can we find out,
We're
Mr.
not
Chair,
lawyers.
if Roger knows what a committee discussed about that item?
I don't have a copy of their minutes. As I say, I got this today at
Well,
noon.
what's the intent? What are they trying to achieve?
Well, if you read it, if everyone reads it what it says is that the owner must live in one of the units for the first 5 years, and thereafter it's
Once it's
silent.
granted.
Once it's granted.
Right, it's 5 years after
Yeah.
the accessory dwelling unit is granted.
It's a must,
Clearly
so
in the statute.
a must is a shall, basically. It's not as strong as a shall, but it says you must occupy it. So if you create an attached accessory dwelling unit, you have to live as owner in one of them. One of either the primary or accessory for at least 5 years.
Oh.
Now, I agree with you,
I got it now. I got
it's
it.
gonna be difficult to enforce that. Is someone gonna go back after 5 years and check to see if the owner occupant is living there? I'm not sure if how that's going to be tracked logistically.
But
It
I-
depends on how many of them we have. If we have a landslide, then, yeah, it might be difficult to keep
Well,
track of.
I think the information you gave about how it's optional to require the owner to live in the place, for some reason, I thought that was a requirement, and the fact that it's not kind of makes this make a little more sense to me.
Yeah.
So I understand, I guess the city would have a right to make that rule.
It's a
I don't-
policy decision.
Say it again?
It's a policy decision by the Board of Aldermen, what they want. That's what the
Yeah.
committee is telling the full board, that they would like to see that as a policy from the board, from
So they don't
that
have to
particular
wait.
committee.
They're not-
It's whether the board agrees with that policy or you feel it's not appropriate and you want to make a recommendation for or against it.
So, can we review, what are the options after that 5-year requirement is met?
No requirement, then you can have 2 apartments and rent them out. One's would be accessory use to the other, but there's no requirement that the owner live there. I thought there was, and I think the city would be better served, quite frankly, if there was. But,
I remember it the same way you do. The city required that you had to live there,
Well,
in one of
in
the
the earlier
units.
version, that's what was there. This one added the 5 years. The earlier version
Just says,
said they had to live there.
the owner of the property must occupy either the primary or accessory dwelling unit as the owner's principal place of residence,
Right.
period.
The last one, it was
Right.
perpetuity. Yeah. As long as it was gonna be
I think
considered
the
that.
city's a little better off having an accessory dwelling unit in an owner-occupied building, rather than turning all of our single-family residents. Really, what you're allowing to happen is, any house in the city, anywhere, any single-family house could be turned into a 2-family without,
After 5 years.
after 5 years. I mean, again, I could be missing something, but that's what it seems like to me.
Yeah, I know, I was reading, I think, I was reading without the language at the last line for the accessory dwelling unit. I just misread it. So I agree, it's definitely,
After.
it's definitely after.
I don't know. I don't like the 5 years. I agree. I don't see why you need it.
Only, I think 750 square feet is not a large unit. Maybe that's a small two-bedroom ADU or a one-bedroom. And a small kitchen, it's not like it's a huge unit.
It's not
And
a
it's,
duplex.
and it's required to be attached, you can't have detached. But, you know, the city can, the zoning board can grant variances to anything, so if there's
I
a,
just don't understand
they
why we
demonstrate.
limit it to 5, why would you put the 5 years? What's the point? All it does is open it up to not having to live there anymore.
It surprises me
Yeah,
that
it
they make
defeats
it
the
less
purpose.
restrictive,
spiders.
I guess. I don't know.
Well, we don't have to agree with it. We can tell them we don't think that's good language.
Yeah, just take out the 5 years.
All right,
Or
well,
just keep it the way it was.
maybe we should, let's go through the rest of the changes and see what else is there, because
Yeah.
maybe we'll have other.
We could
Wasn't
just
there before.
keep it that way.
Oh, got it.
Okay. What else changed, Roger? Number 7?
Looks like number 6, Roger, there was language added there.
There was a spider from the ceiling, sorry, Mr. Chairman.
We're wondering
And
what's-
that was,
I thought they were looking for, looking at the sky like, what is he?
no, it was just, it's web that it was caught in my hair.
So this is still a special exception. It's a special exception that
Yes,
people are gonna have to apply for.
correct.
So, sorry, I was just saying, so the next change, it looks like it's in paragraph 6, is that right?
Right, if you want to move on.
Yeah, I think we'll move
Yeah,
on,
yeah,
we can
yeah.
come back to this one, but.
Yeah, it's the last sentence that's underlined in the new version. It says granting of a certificate of occupancy of accessory dwelling unit shall be contingent upon receipt of a covenant and fees.
I'm all right with that.
It's just clarifying that you have to submit
Right.
That's fine.
before you get your CO.
7, 1 West Street, parking space.
The next item, that's a planning board's recommendation was put
That's ours.
in number 7.
Yeah.
And there was a new paragraph, number 10, added, which now says accessory dwelling units shall only be associated with single-family detached dwellings and shall not be associated with manufactured housing as defined in RSA 674:31. Was a new provision, I think, was added to state law, similar to the condominiums. If you're in a condominium development, you can't have an accessory dwelling unit. I think it's clearer in that case, but if you own a mobile home, maybe it's only 7, and you wanted to do another mobile home next to it, I guess, attach it, and that's not permitted under accessory, as an accessory dwelling unit.
So that doesn't mean a single-family home that is prefabbed. It's not a prefab house they're
Right.
talking about.
It-
They're
it-
talking
that-
about mobile homes and condos.
Right, there's manufacturing is, I've got the RSA's, if you want me to look up that section, I can read it to you, but it's basically a mobile home, a manufactured home.
Yeah, so I just don't like the 5-year thing. I'm good with the rest of it.
Roger, is this saying that a two-family house can't have, an accessory dwelling? You can only have
Right.
a
Right.
single family?
Correct.
You can't add an ADU to a duplex.
No, I'm not saying a duplex, I'm saying, oh, yeah, single family, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But detached dwellings, I thought it had to be attached.
It has to be attached.
The ADU has to be attached.
Yes,
The
Then they're
state
talking
law,
about-
the state law allows the community to allow detached ADUs, but the city decided not to go down that road with this ordinance. It's only attached.
well,
So
that's,
you have a single-family home and you want to add a maximum of, you can't any more than 750 square feet.
and it has to be attached to the single-family dwelling.
Exactly.
Well, this is saying detached.
No, it's saying the single-family
Has to
house
be.
has to be detached, so it can't be the duplex.
Oh,
Right.
okay.
But the ADU still has to be attached.
Because that doesn't clarify it to me, I mean, that doesn't, doesn't say anything about duplexes or anything. It's just saying, single-family detached dwelling.
That's a single home, that's not a duplex.
Okay, maybe it's not clear in my head,
So-
that's what it meant.
What about a detached condominium?
No, it's, I think number 9 covers that.
Oh, yeah.
The single-family and accessory dwelling shall not be separated in ownership, including by condominium ownership.
But I think the situation Steve's talking about is a single condo that's
Single
detached.
condo.
So the ownership wouldn't be separated in that case.
And typically with a condominium, you are governed by the number of units. It's by site plan. It's recorded with the Attorney General's office. There's very strict covenants that are associated with a condominium project. You just can't go and add a unit. It's very difficult to do an addition in many cases if you have a condominium development, because it's pretty set in stone. Any changes would have to be approved oftentimes by 100% of the other condominium owners, which is
Well, I'm saying, what
very
if
difficult to do.
you have 5 and 6 condominiums in
Right.
that situation? If they all agree that they want to adopt this, are they allowed under this ordinance?
Is a condominium unit considered a single-family dwelling?
No.
So if you go to the dwelling unit
Yeah, they are.
accessory
Yes, they are.
definition,
They are.
Yeah.
I live in a
oh,
detached.
Roger just said no.
Well, it's a single-family home, but it's,
Yeah,
you don't own the land under your unit.
no.
In other words, you can't do an addition. You have your unit, and it sits on a piece of property that's owned by the association. You own the unit.
Right.
You don't own the land. You may have rights to the land
understand
under unit. So you can't go and all of a sudden go into the association's land next to your unit and put in an addition without their permission.
I think it's kind of immaterial.
So what you're saying is the condominium rules will protect us from having this occur,
And I would think so.
not city rules.
As a practical
That's
matter or
right.
something.
Right.
But in theory, it seems like.
We even care, I'm not sure I care.
I'm not sure I do either, but just to answer a question, I guess.
If they wanna- You know, if they all decide that's what they
They all
wanna do,
decide,
eat up
yeah.
the condo land, and I don't know. I'm not against that. I guess.
378 units up there and getting everybody to march in one direction is
That's yours, but
not possible.
there are some that are only less than a dozen in Nashville.
That's true, yeah. But if they wanted to put a dwelling unit, I don't know. I don't know that, I don't know it's a bad thing, as long as they follow the rule. I mean,
They would have to come back to the board to amend their site plan because you're changing what was approved. Condominiums are approved by site plan.
Yeah.
Was there any discussion concerning why this has to be a special exception?
And that's been a few months ago, I think, when they first discussed it. They felt, yes, they wanted a process, so the butters could still have some input into the process. The neighborhood, immediate abutters, as to the aesthetics of, make sure that any ADU that's attached to the unit is gonna fit with the neighborhood, is gonna look like it's a part of a unit. In other words, you don't just come in with a container and put it next to your house and cut it, there needs to be some regulation. They felt the existing process was good, and I think, from your past experience, I think the process that we have now works for accessory dwelling units as part of, they used to be referred to as in-law apartments. But it does work. It does give the neighborhood an opportunity to comment.
I think that this is an administrative thing. Here's the requirements. If you meet these requirements, you can do this. You know what I mean? Like, it gives the public a false sense that a zoning board can say no to this if they meet the requirements, and they can't. That's all. It just seems like it's administrative if people don't want it in their neighborhood, they're gonna come to the zoning board, and the zoning board's hands are tied if the people meet the requirements laid out in the special exception.
I believe the zoning board can put conditions on a special exception if they wish,
No.
that might,
Wow.
they can if they wish. You could put a condition on a variance or a special exception if you feel it's appropriate. I mean, it's typically you don't, but a zoning board can.
All right, I mean, it's, if that's what they're gonna do, it just seems like it, I don't know.
I think it's more to look at, and I'm trying to think of it's been a few months since there was discussion on that, and I wasn't at those meetings. I believe Sarah Marchant was, but the feeling was that they have, how do you make the addition work with the house and the neighborhood? You know, it's gotta be reviewed for
Kinda up to them,
setbacks, or
though,
may
right?
need,
Yeah, it's not a planning thing, really.
So,
I'm good with
again,
everything
it's a
but the
policy
5 years.
decision by the Board of Aldermen,
Yeah.
that this is what they
Right,
want.
I get that. I mean, they can make it that way if they want to. It just doesn't seem like it's something that requires land use overview.
Yeah. And maybe at some point in the future, if it works well, and maybe that's something, maybe they'll reconsider and drop.
Take it off later.
Oftentimes that is it, until we know how the process is gonna work and whether it's working well.
I guess it doesn't preclude us from taking it off later, or them from taking it off. All right, so what do we think? I just don't get the 5-year thing.
I mean,
I would say we just make a
seems
recommendation
arbitrary, I
to
mean-
keep it this,
Somebody
accept it
came up
as,
with it for a reason.
well,
Right, they put that in there for a reason.
I'm trying to understand why they did.
Well, I mean, I guess the thinking might be, well, if we say 5 years, that's a sufficient amount of time that somebody's not gonna just, sort of do this in the short term and basically create apartments. They're gonna have skin in the game, they're gonna be vested, they're gonna have to live there for 5 years, and that's sufficiently restrictive. And then if somebody decides in year 6 or 10 or whatever, that for whatever reason, they need to move away or wanna move away, that it would give them flexibility, so they could continue to have the accessory dwelling unit. Because I suppose, if you had that circumstance where somebody was living there for 5 years, and then, several years later, they said, I'm gonna move for some reason, that they could no longer have the accessory dwelling unit. So, I guess that would be my thinking as to why you would put that sort of that number in there, as you'd say, well, that's sufficient enough that somebody would be serious, they're not gonna just do this because they're trying to create apartments, but at the same time, it would not bind somebody forever to living in the property,
It might be that they're trying to, they don't want people to buy a house and then add accelerate and then sell it.
Right.
yeah, but keeping it the way it was takes care of that.
Right, but I think,
It was, the other way was more burdensome, you couldn't do it forever unless you wanted to get rid of the ADU.
right, but I think that's the idea, it's,
Yeah.
putting the 5 years still prevents sort of that short term.
Yeah.
You buy the house, you put it on the ADU, and then you sell it, because you really wanted to create, apartments, basically.
Is it something to do with, like, if you sell it and you still want the person in the ADU to stay there?
Is it grandfathered?
Right,
If
that's
you
the
sold
question.
it,
Yeah, that's
if
what
you
I'm-
sold it, would it be grandfathered
as an ADU?
as an ADU? Once it's determined to be an ADU, is it always an ADU?
Forever and always, yeah.
Not an apartment?
That would be my
Yes.
feelings,
think
yeah,
so,
it's,
right?
I would think so too.
Yeah.
So what's the
Land-
point of having the 5 years?
No point at all.
Right, if you do it in 2 months or 5 years, that's
It's an
the same
ADU,
thing.
Well-
not an apartment.
Well, I guess it's right, because you're saying in that case, if it's an ADU as long as there is someone who's the owner, who's
Yeah.
residing.
Either in the
Always an ADU.
accelerate or in the primary.
Well, the only exception to that would be is if I buy a house, I put an accessory unit in it, I'm living in it, I sign this agreement, and I then, after a year, sell the house to you, and you buy it as investment property. That would not be permitted
No.
under this rule. You would have 4 more years to have it be owner-occupied before you could just rent both apartments by this rule.
Wait, a minute, who wants to have an apartment that has a door that's accessible to your apartment? Who would do that?
That's a whole different question. I mean, accessory use dwellings
Unless you're
are
family.
a
No,
big
you keep
income
talking
for a
about
lot
the
of
word
people.
apartments, and I'm saying, by definition, an ADU, which has a door that's common to 2 units or more,
Yeah.
who would do that? It's not an apartment, not when you're having access to the next guy.
I don't know that I get what you're saying. Of course, it's an apartment.
No, it isn't. It's an ADU. There's a difference between an ADU and an apartment. Somewhere in these laws that says you have to have a door that's accessible to the structure itself,
Primary structure.
primary structure.
Well,
It's not an apartment.
yeah, and it,
Yeah, you have the door, but.
Right, you have privacy. Plenty of buildings you go into the front door, and then there's 2 doors, apartment A and apartment B. That's what you can have. You don't, it's not a
The door is
concept.
not common to both. What I'm talking about is a door that's common to 2 units.
You don't have to have that. You
Yeah.
don't have to have access to the other unit.
Well,
I
you do
think
for
it
an
says you
ADU.
do.
You do for an
Yes, you
ADU.
do.
You do.
Okay.
go to number, paragraph 3 of the state law, it says an interior door shall be provided between the principal dwelling unit and the accessory dwelling unit, but a municipality shall,
Right.
that might have some,
No, but it's a door.
you're fighting a
that
fire.
allows
and
that to
you
happen.
Knock down a door or something, gain access to put out a fire. I mean, that might be useful from a building code
Yeah.
perspective.
So I think you need to rethink the definition of an apartment. It's not an apartment.
No,
Once
but
you sign this agreement, it's an ADU.
Right.
That means you have a door that's
you could
accessible to
have
both.
non-owner occupied ADUs.
When
as
you
a
say
private
that, I'm not trying to argue with you,
Yes,
but
you
you're
are.
leaving the impression that I live in one apartment and you live in the other apartment, and you have access to my apartment and I have access to yours. That is absolutely not the case.
It's locked.
You don't have access to mine. There's 2 separate units. You might have to have a common door, but you don't have access into my dwelling, and I don't have access into yours. And there are hundreds of those in Nashua that are presently set up as in-law apartments. That's the way they're set up.
So
But
what's the definition then of an ADU versus an apartment?
the size of it,
Jerry is right. Its size is 750 square feet,
right.
or whatever the number is.
It's just
So what
clear-
makes the difference between an apartment, defining an apartment, and an ADU then?
Well, it's not really an apartment, it's just an accessory dwelling unit to a single-family home.
No, my question
You know,
is
it's-
what makes one being defined as an ADU and in the other case, an apartment?
I guess these standards make it
Those
defined as an
standards
ADU.
right there. Yeah, have to meet all these things.
You
So
you know,
an
it's
apartment
a
that
question of
meets all
semantics. If you want to refer, since it's a small 750 square foot addition,
Well, it gets
it
back
kind
to
of,
the reason
it
for this
acts
thing
like
in the
a
first
small
place.
1 or 2 bedroom apartment, yes. Whether you want to call it an ADU or an apartment, but the state law, this type of construction and how it's permitted on a single-family house, it's referred to as an accessory dwelling unit, because it's accessory to the
I
principal use,
understand that part.
which is
I'm
a
just
single
saying,
family.
what's the point of this if in fact there's no difference between an apartment? Why would anybody sign up to having an ADU? There's no benefit. Just make an apartment.
Well, let's say you have a house,
Leasing
and you
stuff
want to
like that.
retire,
You don't have to
and
go
you
back.
want to live on the ground floor, and you have a 2-story.
You don't have to lease.
So you do an addition to
don't
your
have to
house
lease.
that's ground floor, you have your own access, you can make an ADA access, and you can rent out the main house to another family. And you can get income from that main rental to help you stay in your ADU. That could be one way of,
No?
I mean, so,
That doesn't answer the question of what's the difference between an apartment and an ADU. You could get the same financial benefit by calling it an apartment and not have to sign up to all this nonsense.
Okay, let me take a
you
crack
need
at
zoning
this,
for an apartment.
Okay?
Yeah.
The city of Nashua had accessory dwelling units, and part of that requirement was that it be a blood relative that live in there. The goal of that was to keep single-family houses that are zoned single-family from becoming multifamilies. So the rule was, you can't rent it. You can't turn it into an apartment. You cannot just rent it to a stranger. It has to be a blood relative, okay?
Okay.
The state legislature came in and said, we don't have enough low-income housing, and the way we're going to eliminate that is we're gonna change the law that governs what an accessory dwelling unit can be. And one of the rules the state made was that you cannot limit it to a blood relative. And when we saw that a couple of years ago, and you guys don't have to agree with me, but you might, when you saw that, you sat there and you said, all they're doing by making this law is turning all of the in-law apartments into apartments. That's what they're doing. So all the single-family houses in the city of Nashua, with a special exception, will be able to turn themselves basically into a two-family. Because they'd be able to convert that, as long as they follow these rules, they'll be able to convert that house and rent a piece of it to a stranger. Because of the state law. It's not what Nashua wants to do. The state law changed in June, I think, of 2017. So now, we can make rules, but we can't make that rule. So they're trying to contain it, but when you're asking, why would you not make it a two-family? Because if you live, say, on Bates Drive, that's zoned residential, you can't put a two-family there. You'd need a variance to do that. It would be a violation of the zoning requirement. But with this, you don't. All you're gonna need is a special exception, and all you're gonna have to do with that special exception is meet the criteria that's laid out, and it won't be able to be denied. Which is why I was saying that I didn't think it was a good idea to make it a special exception, because people who live in single-family house neighborhoods are gonna be coming to the zoning board saying, we don't want an apartment in our neighborhood, and the zoning board's not gonna be able to say no. Because the people who made the application, according to state law and according to what this ordinance is gonna lay out, met the requirements. Shell versus City of Manchester, 1957. If you meet the requirements of a special exception, it must be approved. And if you don't, it must be denied. So the zoning board's gonna be sitting there going, they meet all the requirements, we can't say no. You're gonna have neighbors sitting in the audience going, you're putting a two-family next to me in my single-family resident neighborhood. But that's why I was saying, maybe not a good idea to have it as a special exception anyway, but that's the reasoning behind why you wouldn't want a two-family.
What's the reasoning behind the 5 years then?
That we were trying to,
Well, let me ask this question, because we can get back to it, because we've sort of gone astray a bit.
yeah, sorry about that.
No, it's all right. I mean, it's sort of just naturally went that way. But does anybody look at that 5-year requirement and say, yeah, I think that's a good idea?
I think it's a bad idea. I think it,
Does anybody think it's a good idea?
oh,
No, we don't. Because you keep
Does
it the
anybody?
same way it was before.
Just asking, because if I'm trying to determine whether there's any disagreement as to,
So to understand the consequences of that is that after 5 years, you just have 2 apartments. You can have 2 apartments, the owner being absent.
right, owner moves to Florida, you got 2 apartments.
yeah, exactly.
Does anybody?
Wait a minute, back to Jerry's earlier points. If it's not zoned for 2 apartments, then what you're saying is not true. It's not zoned for 2 apartments, it's zoned for ADUs and a main house.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter, because it's already, you've already got the ADU, and it no longer has to be owner occupied in either unit.
It's not, it's only an apartment if it's zoned an apartment.
Yeah.
If it's zoned a single family with an ADU, it's gonna say.
That's where I'm
Right.
confused. If it's zoned to be a main house and an ADU,
That forever.
which is a single-family home with an
It's
ADU,
gonna be that forever.
that's not the same as having zoning for 2 apartments.
Correct.
It
But
is
yeah.
not the same zoning-wise,
It's
correct?
not the same zoning, but what you have is the special
Well,
exception.
that's my
that
point.
allows
If
you
it's
to
not
use-
zoned for 2 apartments, then you don't get 2 apartments.
So we probably have conflicting
That's
ordinances.
not right. You
But this
do
is-
get
you-
2
yeah,
apartments
but if
after
you-
5 years.
You get to, yeah,
Right, Technically, it's
Get
still.
rid of the 5 years.
That's what we're saying.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
nobody here agrees that we ought to retain the 5 years, so why don't we
Just-
just move on?
No, we wanna we wanna continue that a owner occupied.
Owner
Well,
occupied,
that's
I
what
have
it
no
was.
problem with.
Keep it the same way it was
Right, I
last
think-
time.
I think
Yeah,
this-
and get rid of that last.
Would just be as the owner's principal place of residence, period. That was how
Exactly.
it read originally.
It seems to me like it would be in the best interest of single-family property owners in Nashua to have it that way.
I think so.
Exactly.
I agree.
Yes,
It does.
So let's say that.
I wouldn't.
let's tell 'em.
But
yeah,
like I
throw it
say,
away,
somebody
throw it
came
away.
up with this idea for a reason. I just don't know what it is.
Yeah, we don't know what it is. I mean, that's the problem. We don't know the reasoning. But I mean, like I said, the only thing I can think of is somebody was thinking, you know, there are special circumstances.
residents,
Somebody's been
period.
living, you
Right
know,
after the word
they're
resident,
not
put it in
intending
the
for it to
period.
just be
Get
create
rid
an
of the
apartment
rest.
because they have to be there for at least 5 years. Maybe there's some emergency, they have to leave and they say, oh my God, I have to, you know, I have to move. And, you know, but if I move, you know, I have to sell the house, or, I don't know. Somebody probably was thinking through some sort of scenario where they said, oh, you know, after 5 years, people should have more flexibility. That's the only reason I can think of is that you would account for some special circumstances where somebody doesn't wanna sell the house, but they have to move.
If you
That
have
seems
to
like a
guess,
pretty
it's
unlikely
wrong.
event.
Yes,
Get rid of it.
exactly.
Yeah, I'm only trying to speculate as to
Yeah.
what.
Put a period after residence and tell
Put a
them.
period in it, just revert to the original language.
Yeah.
is my
Yeah.
suggestion.
Original,
Okay. Are there
of
any
number
other-
5.
Any other suggestions?
Now, I have a quick
Comment?
question.
No.
If, someone has a larger house, say 3,000 square foot house, single family, can they do an ADU within that footprint? So it doesn't have to be an addition?
They would have to do it.
Sorry?
They would have to. It would have to be within that, yes, they can.
No,
No,
they could,
'cause-
Not more than 750 square feet.
You could do an addition.
right, but it could be 3,750 square feet. It doesn't have.
Oh, I see what you're
I'm
saying.
asking,
750 square feet within the
but then, can
3,000.
you rework inside of your house and?
Sure.
That's
Yeah,
what
I don't
most
see
will
why
be.
not.
Yeah, most
would
are.
be-
Most will be exactly that.
Yeah.
Change the second floor or change the lower level.
Basement.
or
All
something
within
like
the
that.
same roof.
All within the same,
Most
I
will
don't think
be
it
that.
has to be an addition.
Some are, but.
because this talks only about additions, I believe. Well, Roger kept saying addition, so I thought maybe that was a requirement.
doesn't
Well,
really
typically,
say.
you wouldn't go in to rip out structural walls in a house. It may be more complex to try to create a 750 square foot in an existing dwelling unit,
Right.
add a new kitchen, the plumbing. It could be done, but it would be, it would be very expensive. I mean, Ed probably could speak more to that than I could, but it would be expensive to do it that way.
This doesn't say anything
Whether
about
it's that
addition.
practicable.
No, I think it was just, Roger kept talking about additions, so I thought maybe that was
Well,
a requirement.
typically, that's what we would see with this sort of thing is an addition. You know,
Yeah.
it, you know,
We don't care.
I can't see, I mean, you could have a situation where you have an upstairs, downstairs, but you may have to provide a way of getting upstairs with the second means of egress if it was gonna be a different, there may be building codes that come into play with some of that stuff.
Right.
Structural walls, rewiring, adding new kitchens, it gets very complex when you're trying to redo something like that. If it's already set up as a,
Can't make a law for that. I mean, that's. it
oh,
is
you know,
what
but
it
you
is.
have to comply with building code. We have a lot of duplexes, probably in the Crown Hill area where you have upstairs, downstairs, Jerry indicated. And they're set up that way. They were designed that way. You come in the front door and then you block it off and you have two ways in, and you have one stairway up. And they typically have, if it's a new one, they'd have to have a second way down too.
Yeah.
All right, so any, other than the 5-year issue, anything
No.
anybody else has in terms of recommendations, changes? No.
Just
So-
recommending that the existing number 5 stay.
Right, so I think it would be, it would be favorable recommendations subject to our.
Reverting to the requirement that the owner of the property occupy one of the dwellings.
Indefinitely.
And
Right,
that-
they're just that requirement, you have, the owner of the occupy
Right.
Yep.
of the property has to occupy one of the dwellings.
Okay.
That's the way it was originally, I think, right?
It was, yes.
You want just original language then?
I'm gonna say original language.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Leclerc?
Yeah, so I'd make a motion. I'd make a motion for a favorable recommendation of, O-17-036, with the, with a note that, section 190-32B5 be reverted to the original language in the prior edition, requiring an owner occupant at all times during it.
So motion by Mr. Leclerc is to make a favorable recommendation on O-17-036, subject to the change in section 190-32B5, that the paragraph states, the owner of the property must occupy either the primary or accessory dwelling unit as the owner's principal place of residence, period.
Clarification? Did we take it off the table and vote on that?
It's not on the table.
It shows motion to remove from the table.
So we have to say everything that we just said for the last 45 minutes again. I'm saying.
I'm just seeing that's what it's showing here, so.
Well, we can take it off the table.
That's fine, here.
Go ahead, make a motion.
I make a motion to take it off the table.
Motion by Mr. Weber, remove this item from the table. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Kelly. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Mr. Leclerc?
I'd like to make a motion for O-17-036, that we make a favorable recommendation, subject to section 190-32B5, be reverted to the original language, which was the owner of the property must occupy either the primary or accessory dwelling unit as the owner's principal place of residence, period.
Motion by Mr. Leclerc to make a favorable recommendation on O-17-036, subject to the change in 190-32B5. Is there a second to that motion? Second by Mr. Rapucci. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Okay. Other business, case number 3. Planning Board reappointment to the Capital Improvement Committee for a 2-year term to expire August 1st, 2019. Charles Bugis and our own Danny Kelly.
Mr. Chair, I did speak with both of the members, and they are willing to continue to serve.
Okay.
Thank you, Dan. I say we strongly support the motion to
Yeah.
renominate, or reappoint, sorry.
Okay. Make a motion,
Leclerc?
reappoint to the Capital Improvement Committee for the 2-year term to expire August 1st, 2019. Charles Boudris and Daniel Kelly.
Motion by Mr. Claire to reappoint Charles Bugis and Daniel Kelly to the Capital Improvement Committee for the 2-year term. Is there a second to that motion? Second by Mr. Weber. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you.
The other gentleman, is he part of our board?
No. There's, I don't know what, is he just a general public member?
He is. He was appointed, he's a longest-serving member. I think he's been on the committee for 30 years.
30
Continuous
years.
service for 30 years.
That's unbelievable.
So he does provide a very
Must like it.
good perspective from a longevity
That's a
point
lot
of
of
view.
continuity there.
Yeah.
Discussion item, any discussion items?
One quick, when we do our roll call, there are a couple of members that haven't been here for a while. Are they alternate members or are they full members?
Yeah, they're all, I mean, the only regular member not here tonight is David.
Okay, so they're not subject to the, not by our bylaws, if a member misses 3 consecutive meetings, that's grounds for removal.
We have openings
Really?
for
That's
other
allowed?
alternates, though. Yeah, we have other
It's been in the
openings
packet.
for alternates.
I've never
right
had to
now,
look.
right?
We do.
We do have
There's
openings,
5
yeah.
alternates that the mayor can appoint.
Yeah, so if anyone knows anyone who's interested in serving on the planning board, by all means.
Yeah, but I think Steve's raised an interesting point. They never show up. So why do we keep putting them on the roster?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the bottom line is, we don't have anybody else to fill the spots at the we have empty spots as it is, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's
Okay,
not.
I'll buy that.
But I agree with you. I mean, if
We
we
had
certainly, if
people
we had
beating
other
down the
folks who
door.
were interested and we, then that would be a different story. So I would say, if, like I said, if anyone knows anyone who thinks they may be interested in serving, certainly, let us know and we can run that up to the mayor and see if we can.
They do have terms. I think one of them will expire next year, and I think, I'll look at their terms. Once they expire, they can be, someone can be reappointed in their place, or they can be removed from office by the Board of Aldermen. Typically, that doesn't happen, but it can happen under the rules of procedure and ordinances.
Mr. Chairman, if there's no other business, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Motion by Mr. Kelly to adjourn.
Second.
Second by Mr. Pucci. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes, and we are adjourned at 8:11.